If you've ever felt overlooked, silenced, or told your dreams were too much, this story was for you. Listen and stay tuned. They say your whole life flashes before your eyes when you're about to die, but mine didn't, only one moment did. The first time someone called me forgettable. The rain had started as a drizzle, the kind that gently mists your skin and makes you believe it might stop soon. But by the time I stood in front of the casting building, it had turned relentless, washing the sidewalk in shimmering grief. I stood still beneath a flickering street lamp, the soft hum above my head doing nothing to distract from the sinking weight in my chest. My dress clung to my skin, cheap fabric but chosen with care. The hem head started to fray from the water, the sleeves stuck to my arms like apologies I couldn't take back. My bag hung off one shoulder, the diary tucked under my arm, shielded from the storm like it was something fragile. Because it was. It was the only part of me I had left that hadn't been rejected. They canceled again. I stared at my phone screen, the words blurred as water, maybe rain, maybe tears, slid down the glass. Your audition has been canceled. Apologies. No explanation, no call, just a message that might as well have said, "You're not needed." I had gotten good at pretending this didn't hurt, smiling through dismissals, bowing politely when I was cut after one line, swallowing down pride every time someone's daughter, niece, or family friend walked into the role I had starved for. But today was different. This was the callback, the one they said was mine to lose. And I had lost, without even stepping into the room. My fingers tightened around the spine of my diary. I could feel the creases of pages I had dog-eared, the ink that had bled where I'd cried onto the paper late at night, monologues they never heard, characters I built in secret, scenes I performed to the ceiling of my one-room apartment, hoping the world would someday notice, hoping someone, anyone, would tell me I mattered. Maybe I should have stopped chasing this years ago. I took a step back from the awning. The rain hit me full force now, soaking through my coat, plastering my bangs to my forehead. My mascara had begun to run. I could taste the bitterness of it at the corner of my mouth. I didn't care. Let them see me like this. Or maybe that was the problem. No one was watching. My heels clicked against the wet concrete as I wandered toward the crosswalk. The traffic light blinked yellow in the distance, casting everything in a sickly hue. Cars passed, their tires slicing through puddles. I stared into the middle of the intersection. The world felt out of sync, like I'd stepped off a stage mid-performance and forgotten my lines. What was I doing? What did any of it matter? My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. It didn't matter. No one ever messaged to say, "You deserved better." A gust of wind caught the edge of my coat, flipping it open. My hands instinctively moved to catch it, and the diary slipped from under my arm. It hit the pavement with a soft smack, pages fanning open like a desperate plea. I bent to pick it up. That's when I heard the tires screeching, fast, close. A horn blared. Too late. I turned my head just enough to catch the glow of headlights. For a split second, it felt like a spotlight. Center stage. Is this it? The impact knocked me off my feet. I didn't feel pain, just the cold. The absolute unrelenting cold that soaked into my bones as my body crumpled onto the pavement. Somewhere nearby, someone screamed. Another voice shouted, but they all sounded far away, like echoes from behind a curtain. I blinked up at the night sky. The rain hadn't stopped. It didn't care. It kept falling, like it had been waiting for this moment. My fingers curled around something soft, damp, a page from my diary. I brought it to my chest. My breath was shallow now, vision dimming. There were things I wanted to say, but none of them would come out. Only one thought remained. A second chance. Just one. "Let me write the script," I whispered. I wasn't begging the heavens. I wasn't praying to some god I stopped believing in years ago. I just wanted to choose. To not be at the mercy of last-minute cancellations, casting politics, the same fake smiles and cold hands that pretended to care. To tell the story of every girl who never got called back. A single tear, maybe it was rain, slid down my cheek and disappeared into the gutter. I let my eyes close, and then nothing, but it didn't feel like an end. It felt like pause, like the world had taken a breath and was waiting for me. I expected oblivion, darkness, silence, a void where breath should have been. Instead, warmth. Fabric grazed my skin, coarse, faintly scented with detergent from a life I thought I'd left behind. My fingers stirred, curling into sheets. Air filled my lungs, sharp and alive. Birdsong drifted in, soft and unremarkable, the kind you only notice when you've forgotten its existence. My eyes fluttered open. Pale morning light flooded the room, too pure for the rain-soaked street where I last stood, too gentle for the sterile hum of a hospital ward. I bolted upright, heart racing, the blanket slipping from my shoulders. My bed, my old dorm bed, pink checkered duvet, frayed at the edges. A warped wooden bookshelf, sagging under the weight of forgotten dreams. Above the window, a plastic wall clock ticked relentlessly, its minute hand frozen between 6 and 7, as if time itself had paused to mock me. I stumbled from the bed, knees buckling against the cold vinyl floor. My hands, trembling, yanked open the desk drawer. There it lay, my student ID, 3 years old. My face stared back, bangs uncut, eyes unscarred by the weight of rejection. The calendar on the wall remained untouched, frozen in March. 3 years ago. A date circled in red ink. Audition, 3 p.m. My handwriting. My marker. The audition I never reached, the one erased before I could even step into the room, sparking 3 years of shattered hopes and stolen chances. I died. I know I died. Yet here I stood. This was not a dream, not a fleeting vision. I reached for the mirror above my desk, its cracked corner catching the sunlight like a fracture in time itself, a spiderweb of glass holding my reflection hostage, my face softer, untouched by the grief of late-night tears. My wrist smooth, unmarred by the crash. I pressed my fingers to the glass, tracing the splintered edge. "I'm back," I whispered, the words fragile, barely daring to exist. Yet they were real. I felt them in my bones, in the quiet pulse behind my ears. The universe hadn't claimed me. It had returned me. I didn't scream. I didn't weep. I sat on the edge of the bed, the clock's relentless tick, tick, kick, echoing in the silence. Something deeper stirred within me, louder than the seconds passing. A spark, a vow, a fire kindling in my chest. This time, I would not wait, I would not beg, I would not linger in the shadows of someone else's stage. I ignored the phone, the lines I once memorized, the casting office that would only turn me away. Instead, I powered on my ancient laptop, its hum a faint heartbeat of possibility. The wallpaper flickered to life. A grainy still from a web drama I once adored, one I auditioned for and lost. I opened the browser, fingers steady, and typed. ProSync Tech Corp, stock history. The graph loaded, slow and deliberate. I knew what it would show. 3 years ago, a fledgling startup, its numbers unsteady, dismissed by a producer as a gamble not worth taking. Yet soon after, the AI boom would propel it skyward. Licensing deals, global expansion, a meteoric rise. Today was March, the cusp of their ascent. I logged into an old brokerage account opened on a whim years ago. The balance glowed on the screen, 4.2 million. Every one I hadn't spent on acting classes or unpaid internships. My entire world condensed into digits. I hesitated, one heartbeat. Then I bought every share I could. Weeks melted into a blur. I skipped the audition. I didn't need it anymore. In dim internet cafes on my cracked phone screen under borrowed Wi-Fi, I watched the numbers climb. Doubled, tripled. Each tick upward felt like a pulse not of greed, but of reclamation. I wasn't chasing wealth, I was forging leverage. Starlight Entertainment loomed before me, its faded sign a ghost of ambition. Rusted gates, dust-fogged windows, a relic of a studio clinging to survival. In my old life, it would rise from obscurity with Autumn Dust, a series that turned unknowns into stars overnight. They had rejected me once, smiled thinly, claimed I lacked camera presence. Today, I hadn't come to plead for a role. I stood outside the gate, a black coat draped over my shoulders, carrying the faint echo of rain from a street I'd never died on. My boots crunched against dried leaves, each step deliberate. The glass door caught my reflection. Same face, but transformed. Gone were the hand-me-down clothes, the weight of desperation. I looked like someone who belonged. 2 hours later, I faced Director Shim in his cramped office, the air thick with dust and doubt. He looked weary, older than memory, his eyes flickering with skepticism. "You want to invest?" he asked, voice dry. I slid a folder across the desk, the numbers inside speaking louder than I ever could. His gaze lingered on the pages, narrowing as realization dawned. "You're not here for a silent stake, are you?" I leaned back, a faint smile curving my lips. "I'm not silent. I'm here to own." Silence stretched, heavy and electric. He stood, extending his hand. "You're either fearless or reckless." "Perhaps both," I said, meeting his grip. His hand was firm, steady, like he sensed the shift in the air. By dusk, I wandered the darkened halls of the studio now bearing my name. Faded posters curled on the walls, light bulbs buzzing with exhaustion. Yet this place held more than decay. It held space. Space for stories untold, for voices like mine, drowned out by privilege and power. I passed the main rehearsal mirror. My reflection stared back, still catching up, still trembling with the weight of what I'd done. But my eyes burned with fire. They canceled my audition? Fine. I'm not auditioning anymore. I'm writing the script. The overhead lights flickered once, then buzzed into a dim yellow haze. I stood beneath them in the center of the studio's main rehearsal floor, alone except for the silence and the faint hum of age electricity crawling through the walls. The air smelled of dust, dry paint, and time. Starlight Entertainment. My name was on the deed now, yet the room looked at me like it still didn't believe I belonged here. A layer of grime coated the glass panels lining the upper walls. The floors were warped in places, and someone had left an old director's chair overturned in the corner like they never meant to come back. I walked past it slowly, my boots echoing with each step. It felt like walking through an abandoned church. This place was discarded, forgotten, just like me. I reached the front of the room where the announcement board used to be, warped cork and broken pins. I pulled out the single-page printout I had folded in my coat pocket and pressed it into the board, a fresh pin through the corner. Moonlit Dreams, a new original drama. Starring Yoonji lead, directed by TBD, written by TBD. No logo, no sponsors, no network. Just a title, and me. The backlash didn't wait. It hit within hours of filing the casting notice online. She's lost her mind. Casting herself? Is this a vanity project? Didn't she quit the industry after getting blacklisted or something? The last one made me laugh. If only they knew how far I'd gone just to earn the right to be blacklisted. My inbox filled with rejection emails from agents who refused to send actors to audition for me. Uncertain production quality, no known director attached, lead casting deemed non-competitive. I didn't ask to be measured. I'm not asking anymore. Minho lived in a 2-room rooftop flat above a barbershop in Hongdae. The first time I knocked, he didn't answer. The second time, I left a script sample at his door. Just a monologue I'd written in the middle of the night. It was raw, unedited, ugly in all the right places. I didn't expect him to call. On the third night, I returned to find the monologue on the floor, folded shut with a single line scribbled across it. "Stop pretending you're not angry, it ruins the performance." The door opened before I could knock. He looked different from what I remembered. Minho had always carried a haunted kind of beauty. Too much pain behind the eyes for someone in their early 30s. But tonight, he looked tired in a deeper way. His hoodie was frayed at the sleeves. One hand trembled as he held the doorknob. "You wrote that?" he asked, not bothering with a greeting. I nodded. "I heard your voice in it," he said quietly. "That doesn't happen much anymore." He stepped aside. Inside, his flat smelled like instant coffee and ink. scripts stacked on every surface, most with lines crossed out violently in red. He poured 2 cups without asking if I wanted any. "You're casting yourself," he said, sitting across from me. "I have to." His brow lifted, but he didn't argue. "It'll destroy your credibility." I smiled faintly. "What credibility?" He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes traced my face, not with lust or judgment, but something closer to forensic curiosity, like he was trying to see what made me keep going. "You think this will change anything?" "No," I said. "I think it will change me. That's enough." That night, he walked me back to the stairwell. Before I could descend, he called after me. "Pound condition." I turned. No networks, no studio execs, no filters. If we're doing this, we're doing it honest. I nodded once. Honest it is. Finding Ji-woo took longer. His name no longer appeared on any script databases. The last time I saw him, he was standing outside an award show after party in the rain, holding a screenplay that someone else would win a trophy for. He'd ghost-written entire seasons of a nationally aired drama and never received credit. The industry broke him. Quietly. Not with scandal, but indifference. I found him in a second-floor bookstore tucked behind a bus terminal. He was wearing a threadbare coat, hunched over a stack of fantasy novels. He didn't look up when I said his name. "I'm not writing anymore," he said before I could speak. "I know. I'm not the guy you remember, not even close." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a worn piece of paper, the opening scene from a pilot we'd written together at 19. A single line highlighted in yellow. "You can chain her hands, but she'll speak through the fire." His hands froze. "That line," I said. "You gave me that line the night after my worst audition. I copied it into my diary. Every time I thought about quitting, I read it again." He finally looked up. His eyes glistened. "You remembered that?" I never forgot. He stared at me like he wanted to believe in something again, but couldn't remember how. "I don't have it in me anymore, Unji. Not the way I used to." I placed the script page on the counter. "Then just help me write something true." 3 days later, the 3 of us stood in the center of the studio. The air was still thick with dust. A bulb overhead flickered violently, humming like it might give up. Ji-woo pulled the cord. It steadied. I pinned the revised script page to the wall. Moonlit Dreams, Scene 1. No budget, no guarantees. But the dialogue was ours. Minho dropped a roll of floor tape. Ji-woo spread out scene notes across a cracked table. The walls echoed with the sound of possibility. We weren't a production. We were a dare. Somewhere in the building, a forgotten speaker crackled with feedback. The lights dimmed for a moment, then came back stronger. Unji staring at the pinned script as her torn audition badge drops from her coat pocket to the floor. The silence after the light came back wasn't peaceful. It was too still, too perfect, like the air just before a curtain rises, right before the mistake you forgot to rehearse reveals itself to everyone. The next morning, someone had drawn a red line through my name on the whiteboard. Wasn't thick, just one dry marker stroke. Faint, almost an afterthought, but it bled across the schedule like a wound. It started small, an email from our equipment supplier. "Unfortunately, due to unforeseen demand, your rental contract will be delayed." And a text from our sound tech. "Hey, something's come up, can't commit to this project, sorry." By the end of the week, our lighting rig had been mysteriously rerouted to a different production. The storage key we used for props disappeared. Sponsors who had initially agreed to back our crowdfunding campaign sent curt withdrawal notices. No explanation. Just silence wrapped in politeness. I stood in the studio, staring up at the broken microphone hanging limp from the ceiling beam. The cord had been twisted, cut, and retied, poorly. Someone had been in here. Why? We hadn't even released the teaser yet. We hadn't asked for anything. No fame, no awards, just space, just one chance. But someone was already trying to erase us. The headline broke 3 days later. Heiress actress buys her way into lead role. Industry whispers favoritism in Moonlit Dreams project. There it was, in bold font, with my face cropped badly from an old magazine feature, darkened under the header like I'd done something wrong. Like I was something to be ashamed of. The byline was anonymous, but I knew exactly who wrote it. Sujin. The first time I met Sujin, she was wearing a velvet ribbon in her hair and holding a cup of imported espresso like it was a designer bag. She walked into the audition room an hour late, smiled at the director, and skipped half the lines in her read. They still gave her the part, because her father ran the funding board for the entire network. And I'd watched from the hallway as the assistant who handed her the script whispered, "She doesn't even need to try." Back then, I told myself it wasn't personal. Now I knew better. This was war. The quiet kind. The kind you never see coming until you're already bleeding. The inbox filled overnight. Hate, sarcasm, screenshots of the article shared hundreds of times. Rich girl pretending to suffer. Pathetic. Did daddy buy her a studio too? She's not even pretty enough to pull off delusion. I sat in the rehearsal room, knees curled to my chest, the whiteboard with the red mark still behind me. The lights had stopped flickering, now they just buzzed, a low, tired hum that filled the space like a heartbeat on life support. I thought about calling Minho, or Jiwoo, or anyone, but the silence inside me was louder than any dial tone. Maybe they were right. Maybe I had bought my way in. Maybe I was just another desperate girl clinging to a camera and hoping someone would mistake her wounds for talent. The microphone above me swayed slightly, its cut wire still exposed. I don't want this to break me, but it already was. That night, the building felt colder. I stayed late, alone, hoping to distract myself with rewrites. But every sentence sounded fake, every emotion dulled. I stood in front of the rehearsal mirror again, the same one where I'd promised myself I'd never ask for permission. And for the first time since I came back, I looked like I was lying. Then I heard it. A slam, then a shout, not from the hallway, backstage. I followed the sound through the corridor, past the storage room. That's when I heard Jiwoo's voice. "You think she bought this role? She paid in scars." Silence. Then, footsteps, retreating. I rounded the corner. He was standing near the costume rack, chest heaving. His glasses were fogged. He hadn't seen me yet. I stepped into view. He froze. "You heard?" I nodded. His hands curled into fists. Some guy from the original sponsor crew came by to return the set mock-ups. He said the team's embarrassed to be associated with that kind of vanity project. I didn't speak. He looked at me then. And for the first time, I saw not pity, but fury. "They think you're here because you want attention," he spat. "They think you're here because you couldn't make it any other way, but they didn't see you break in rehearsals. They didn't see you fall apart and still keep going." His voice cracked. "They didn't see you walk back into this building when every door had already slammed shut." I took a step closer. He looked down, ashamed of the way his voice had shaken. I touched his shoulder gently. "You didn't have to defend me." "Yes, I did," he said, "because you're not just the lead. You're the reason this exists." I hadn't cried until then, but standing in that empty hallway, surrounded by cheap props and peeling paint, I let the tears come. Not because of the hate, but because someone had remembered who I really was. The next morning, the red line was still on the whiteboard. But beside it, written in bold black marker, someone had scrawled, "Rewrite it," and beneath that, "She's not leaving." Yanji picking up the broken microphone and quietly saying, "Let them watch." The microphone was cold in my hand, frayed wire brushing against my skin. I didn't fix it. I just held it. Like maybe if I gripped it hard enough, I could wring something honest out of myself again. The studio was empty, no crew, no noise, only the soft creak of the old boards beneath my boots as I walked to center stage. A single bulb hung above me, swaying slightly, caught in some draft I couldn't see. I didn't wait for rehearsal. There was no audience, no feedback, no lines. I stood there and spoke. Soft at first. My name is... And then again, louder. My name is Lee Yoonji, and I am not a placeholder. The words sounded brittle in the air, like porcelain dropped and caught just before shattering. I let silence stretch, then took a breath and kept going. I am not a substitution. I'm not the afterthought when your favorite choice says no. I'm not your charity cast. I could feel it now. The tremble in my chest, not fear, not anymore, a kind of pressure, something rising. I stepped forward. I'm not asking for your permission. I've already lived without it. I didn't know Minho was in the back of the theater until I finished. He'd leaned against the doorframe, arms folded across his chest, face unreadable in the shadows. But when I turned, our eyes met through the gloom, and something in me locked into place. He walked down the aisle slowly, hands still tucked into the sleeves of his coat, like he wasn't sure if he was about to direct me or apologize. "You know," he said, voice low, "you rehearse like someone who doesn't think they'll be heard." I didn't answer. He moved closer, just enough that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the exhaustion he carried like a second skin. Then he said it. "You're not here to win." My breath caught. "You're here to change what winning means." It was a sentence, just a few words, but it struck me harder than any applause I'd ever chased. Change what winning means. I let it settle in the hollow space behind my ribs where doubt had been living too long. I nodded. Small, quiet, but something inside me cracked open. Later that night, we sat in the rehearsal hall. No lights on, just the stage bulbs glowing amber across the floorboards like forgotten stars. Jiwoo had his laptop open, the screen casting a blue sheen over his face. He hadn't spoken in a while. I watched him backspace a sentence, pause, then start typing again. When he finally stopped, he turned the screen toward me. The final act of Moonlit Dreams. And in it, a monologue, for a character who stood in a theater alone, not to perform, but to remind herself why she ever started. "You rewrote it," I whispered. Jiwoo shrugged, but there was weight behind the motion. The ending didn't make sense anymore, not after all this. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was full. It held everything we didn't need to say out loud. He closed the laptop softly. "I wanted her to rise," he said, "but not because she was chosen, because she chose." I looked down at my lap. My diary rested there, closed, bound by a thin silk ribbon. I hadn't opened it in days. It didn't feel like I needed to anymore. The lines I had written, the roles I had rehearsed in secret, the ache behind each page, they had served their purpose. I didn't need to be remembered for the roles I never got. I wanted to be remembered for the stories I helped others tell. Minho sat cross-legged at the edge of the stage, tossing a pencil between his fingers. "We film it raw," he said. "No fancy tracking shots, just her. That final monologue. One take, no cuts." I raised a brow. "That's career suicide." He smiled faintly. "Good. That means it'll matter." The next morning, I found a new script binder on my desk. Cream cover, thick, heavy with promise. Inside, Jiwoo had slipped a note. "Not every dream needs a curtain call. Some just need a light." The air outside the window shimmered with late spring sun filtered through dusty glass. I could hear distant construction, someone rebuilding something. Traced my finger across the spine of the binder. For the first time in what felt like lifetimes, I didn't feel like I was fighting to stay visible. I felt like I was building something, a stage that wouldn't vanish just because someone more connected showed up. A world with room for misfits, cast-offs, and ghostwriters. For stories that didn't start with fame, but with fire. That night, the three of us returned to the theater. No rehearsal. No crew. Just us. Minho adjusted the lighting board until a single spotlight turned on. It washed across center stage. Pale, glowing, sharp around the edges. Jiwoo sat beside me in the third row, script in hand but unopened. I walked into the light. I didn't speak. I just stood there, not as a performer, but as a promise. The camera slowly zooms in as Uniji closes her eyes under the spotlight and whispers just before the frame fades out. This time, I write it my way. The night air wrapped around me like stage curtains just before they part. Cool, humming, tense with expectation. We were 6 stories above the street, on a rooftop that once stored broken antennas and forgotten signage. Now it held string lights, old folding chairs, a canvas sheet nailed to a brick wall, and a chance. No red carpet, no bodyguards, no press teams feeding soundbites to the media. It's just Jiwoo, adjusting the projector lens with trembling fingers. Minho crouched by the speaker cords, muttering under his breath as he secured a power connection with duct tape. And me, standing by the fire escape ladder, watching Seoul breathe beneath us. I tightened the coat around my waist, not because of the cold, because this wasn't a premiere. This was a gamble. No one shows up and it's over. Everyone shows up and it's worse. The first guests arrived just after 7:30. Not suits or executives, people. A couple in their 20s, whispering nervously. A woman in a trench coat with a notepad. A teenager clutching her phone like a lifeline. Then more small clusters, faces I didn't recognize, eyes scanning the rooftop like they were waiting for the prank to reveal itself. I greeted none of them. Not because I didn't want to, because I was afraid I'd look them in the eyes and flinch. What if they see the cracks in me before they even see the film? By 8:05, the rooftop was full. Dozens of folding chairs, fairy lights above them flickered gently in the breeze. Phones were out, not for selfies, but for escape. The kind of anxious screen crawling people did when they didn't know what to expect. Giwo looked at me from across the rooftop. He nodded once. Minho clicked play. The screen lit up. The projector buzzed, its fan whirring over the audio. Scene 1, my character stands alone in a rehearsal room, breathing through panic. It's just a wide shot, static, no edits. A few people shifted in their chairs. 1 or 2 whispered. I could feel it, the doubt, the tension. They don't believe in this. And then she spoke. The monologue we rewrote, the one I bled into. I wasn't born for applause, I was born for honesty. Silence. Someone coughed, then nothing. Everyone was watching. As the scenes unfolded, I didn't move. I didn't blink. It was me up there, but it wasn't performance, it was confession. My character laughed when she shouldn't, cried without crescendo, failed lines, lost her place, started again. People weren't used to seeing a woman unravel without being punished for it. She wasn't perfect. She was real. By the final act, a stillness had fallen over the crowd. The skyline pulsed in the distance, red signs blinking, traffic humming far below, but the rooftop was quiet. Screen, my character stared straight into the camera, alone in a spotlight. The same spotlight I'd stood under days ago, and she whispered. They never saw me, but I kept shining anyway. The screen went black. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. Then was on. A single chair creaked as someone stood. Clapping, soft, unsure. And then another, then more. Applause, not rehearsed, not polite, not safe. It cracked open the silence and filled the rooftop like thunder. My breath caught in my chest. Turned away, afraid my face might betray how much I needed this. Minho leaned against a railing, arms crossed, face unreadable, but his eyes were glassy. Jiwoo clapped without hesitation, teeth gritted like it was his own soul laid bare. And then something beautiful happened. Phone screens lit up not to record me, but to record each other. Dozens of tiny lights lifted into the air like stars. No hashtags, no filters. Just the sound of people clapping for a truth they hadn't expected. I didn't cry, but something inside me broke. Not in pain. In release. By morning, the internet was on fire. I lay on the couch in the studio's cramped editing bay, scrolling headlines with fingers that trembled from exhaustion. Haunting truth in rooftop screening captures soul's heart. Moonlit dreams, the drama we didn't know we needed. She didn't wait to be seen. She made us look. I blinked. The articles weren't tearing me apart. They were listening. The same names that once ghosted my auditions now filled my inbox with praise. Studio reps, distributors, streaming platforms. People who hadn't called me by name in 3 years now used it like it meant something. Minho slid a cup of tea onto the desk beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded slowly, but I didn't smile, because it wasn't joy I felt. It was justice. Jiwoo walked in a few minutes later, phone to his ear. "They want to syndicate it," he said, voice flat. "Full digital license, full cut." He paused. "They asked if you'd be open to editing the ending for broader appeal." I looked at him. Tell them no. His lips twitched, half amusement, half pride. Already did. The light through the window glinted off the screen as I refreshed the page again. The final scene had been clipped and shared more than 800,000 times. Somewhere, someone wrote in the comments, "I didn't know I needed this until I watched it, thank you." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Not relief, not pride, just silence. The kind that follows a storm. The kind that finally lets you hear your own heartbeat again. Eunji receives a voice message. She hesitates, presses play. It's Sujin's voice. "Congratulations, I underestimated you. Let's talk." The light through my office window had a different quality now, steadier, warmer. Months had passed since the rooftop screening turned our story into a national conversation. Moonlit Dreams was no longer just a gamble or a symbol. It had become a mirror, one people couldn't look away from. Starlight Entertainment, once neglected and nearly bankrupt, breathed with new life. The corridors echoed with the energy of rehearsals, script debates, and the tap of shoes on polished floors. The name that once drew laughter was now spoken with curiosity, then respect. It hadn't been easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. But each day, the weight in my chest had lessened, transformed into something I could carry without bitterness. The message from Sujin came without preface, a voice memo, hesitant, unfiltered. "Congratulations. I never thought you'd make it through. Can we talk?" I listened to it twice. The first time, I felt that old sting behind my ribs. The second time, I heard what she was hiding. She arrived alone, early in the evening, when the last rays of sun cut long shadows across the lobby. She stepped inside with the poise of someone trained to always appear composed, though her eyes darted across the room like she'd entered a courtroom, not a studio. I offered her a seat. Neither of us spoke for a while. Sujin finally exhaled, slow and strained. "I assumed you'd gloat." "I don't need to," I said calmly. She looked away, her fingers brushing the hem of her sleeve. "I spent so long trying to win a war I didn't even believe in." Her gaze lifted to mine. "You made them see you, without destroying them. I don't know how." "You think this was about proving them wrong?" I shook my head. "I built this to prove that we could be something more." Sujin's face, so often cold and unreadable, cracked at the edges. Her voice softened into something almost childlike. "I didn't want this life. I only wanted to survive inside it." Her confession landed between us, fragile and real. I studied her face, not with judgment, but recognition. She had been a puppet too, one who had mistaken power for safety. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "You helped to remind me that there was never going to be a seat for people like us, so I made my own table." She stood slowly, her expression unreadable again, though her shoulders now sagged with something close to relief. "You're braver than I ever was," she murmured, "and maybe freer, too." She left quietly without another word. I didn't watch her go. In the weeks that followed, Starlight became a sanctuary. Jiwoo's new script, intimate, poetic, bold, caught international attention. He was offered contracts he'd stopped dreaming about, and when I saw him receive his first official writer credit, I didn't need to say anything. The way he gripped the paper told me everything. Ho was formally invited back into the Directors Guild. They handed him a golden plaque, expecting gratitude. He thanked them with a nod, then handed me his schedule for the next 3 months, blocked out for 3 new dramas, all under Starlight's banner. Builds remember reputations, he said, tapping his temple. But I remember who handed me a second camera when the first was taken. I smiled. He didn't need to explain. We both knew what that meant. For me, the world didn't suddenly turn kind. The networks sent offers with glossy scripts and carefully worded emails. The same executives who once avoided eye contact at industry galas now asked for meetings. I declined all of them. My answer wasn't driven by anger, it came from clarity. I had something far rarer than fame. I had authority over my story. One afternoon, as the sunlight filtered gently across my desk, I reached for the old diary I had once carried like armor. Its cover was worn, its pages filled with scribbled lines, casting notes, and quiet heartbreak. I ran my fingers over the first page, where I had once written, "Even if no one claps, I'll still perform." That line no longer made me ache. I placed the diary on a shelf above my desk. It didn't belong in my hands anymore. It had done its job. The bell at the front entrance chimed softly. I wasn't expecting anyone. My assistant called in sick, and the office was quiet. Too quiet for a studio in full motion. I rose from my chair and walked to the door. A girl stood there, barely 19 by the look of her. Her shoes were too thin for the cold, her sleeves pulled nervously over her wrists. In her hands, she held a small brown diary, the corners bent from use. She didn't speak. Her eyes said everything. Uncertainty, desperation, hope. The look of someone who had been told again and again that she wasn't quite enough. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. She hesitated, then crossed the threshold with care, as though the room might disappear if she moved too fast. I gestured toward the casting floor. "Let's hear your story." Her fingers tightened around the diary, her eyes flicked up, and in that second, I saw it. The flicker of belief. The thing I once thought I had to chase. Now I had become the place where it landed. In the studio's courtyard, the sign caught the wind. It read, "Starlight auditions open, no experience required, come as you are." Above my desk, the old diary rested quietly, its pages finally still. And I was exactly where I was always meant to be. When you've been silenced, ignored, or made to feel small, it's easy to believe that maybe you were the problem. But stories like this remind us you were never too much. They were simply never enough. Growth doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like walking away, rebuilding in silence, and returning stronger than ever. If you've ever been dismissed, replaced, or underestimated like Unje, like this video and subscribe for more stories that speak to your strength. Comment below, what moment made you realize your worth was never up for negotiation? And if you're still in that place, still waiting to be seen, this story is your reminder. You don't have to wait for permission to begin again.